For generations, we've been taught that the blue whale is the largest animal to have ever existed on our planet. This magnificent marine mammal, reaching lengths of up to 30 meters, 98 feet, and weighing as much as 200 tons, has long held the title of the biggest creature in Earth's history. Larger than any known dinosaur, larger than any prehistoric land mammal, the blue whale has stood as a testament to the extraordinary scale life can achieve in the buoyant medium of water. But what if this long-established fact is wrong? What if, hundreds of millions of years before the first whale ever evolved, the ancient oceans were home to creatures that rivaled or even exceeded the blue whale in size? Recent discoveries are challenging our understanding of the upper limits of animal size and forcing scientists to reconsider which creature truly deserves the title of the largest animal ever to have lived. Deep in the fossil beds of England, in layers of rock dating back to the late Triassic period, approximately 205 million years ago, paleontologists have uncovered tantalizing evidence of marine reptiles of almost unimaginable proportions. These were not dinosaurs, but ichthyosaurs, a remarkable group of ocean-dwelling reptiles that evolved from land-dwelling ancestors and returned to the sea, much as whales would do more than 150 million years later. The story of these colossal creatures is one of scientific detective work, fragmentary evidence, and calculated estimations. It's a tale that begins with seemingly unremarkable fossil fragments found along English shorelines and culminates in the stunning realization that we may need to rewrite the record books on animal size. The discovery challenges not just what we know about prehistoric life, but also our understanding of the biological limits on how large an animal can grow. As we journey back to the Triassic seas, we'll encounter a world vastly different from our own. A single supercontinent surrounded by a vast ocean, where strange reptiles ruled the waters and dinosaurs were just beginning their rise to dominance on land. It was in these ancient waters that evolution experimented with size and form, producing creatures that pushed the boundaries of what seemed biologically possible. Tonight, we'll explore the evidence for these ocean giants, examining the fossil discoveries, the scientific analyses, and the ongoing debates about just how large these ancient ichthyosaurs truly were. We'll meet Ichthyotitan severnensis, a creature named just this year, whose fragmentary remains hint at a body that may have surpassed even the blue whale in scale. We'll look at how these animals lived, what they ate, and the unique adaptations that allowed them to reach such extraordinary sizes. This is not just a story about record-breaking measurements. It's a window into a lost world and a reminder of how much of Earth's history remains to be discovered. It's a tale of scientific discovery that reminds us that what we consider established fact may always be subject to revision as new evidence emerges. And most of all, it's a journey into the mysteries of life's potential, the extraordinary forms and sizes that evolution can produce given the right conditions and enough time. So settle in as we dive beneath the waves of the Triassic Ocean to meet the contenders for the title of the largest animal that has ever lived. Creatures whose fossilized remains are rewriting our understanding of prehistoric life and challenging the blue whale's long-held status as the ultimate giant of Earth's history. The story of giant ichthyosaurs begins long before anyone realized just how massive these animals could be. Ichthyosaurs as a group were first scientifically described in the early 19th century, following discoveries along the English coastline by pioneering paleontologists like Mary Anning. These early finds revealed medium-sized marine reptiles with distinctive fish-like bodies, large eyes, and dolphin-like snouts. They were clearly well adapted for marine life, with streamlined forms, fin-like limbs, and vertical tail flukes for powerful swimming. For decades, paleontologists collected and studied ichthyosaur fossils from around the world, gradually piecing together the evolutionary history of these fascinating marine reptiles. It became clear that ichthyosaurs first appeared in the early Triassic period, around 250 million years ago, evolving from land-dwelling reptilian ancestors that returned to the sea. Over millions of years, they diversified into numerous species and became dominant predators in Mesozoic oceans worldwide. The first hints that some ichthyosaurs reached truly enormous sizes came from discoveries in the western United States. In the 1920s, fossils of a large ichthyosaur named Shastasaurus pacificus were found in California. Later, in Nevada, paleontologists uncovered remains of an even larger species, Shonisaurus popularis, which reached lengths of approximately 15 meters, 49 feet. These discoveries were impressive, but not record-breaking. Many dinosaurs grew larger, and modern blue whales were still substantially bigger. Then, in the 1990s, a remarkable find in British Columbia, Canada, pushed the size boundaries even further. Paleontologists discovered the remains of an enormous ichthyosaur, which they named Shonisaurus sicaniensis. This colossal creature was estimated to have reached lengths of up to 21 meters, 69 feet, approaching the size of some modern whales, though still short of the blue whale's record. But it was a series of discoveries in the United Kingdom that would ultimately challenge the blue whale's status as the largest animal ever. These finds came not from professional paleontologists working on organized excavations, but from amateur fossil hunters scouring the beaches and cliff faces of England's coast. A reminder of how citizen scientists continue to make critical contributions to our understanding of prehistoric life. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, several massive bone fragments were discovered at Oss Cliff near Bristol, England. These enormous fossils were initially misidentified as belonging to dinosaurs or other large reptiles. They were collected, catalogued, and stored in museum collections, where they would remain misclassified for decades. These unassuming specimens would later prove crucial to our understanding of giant ichthyosaurs, but their true significance wouldn't be recognized until the 21st century. Similarly, at a location called Blue Anchor in Somerset, England, other massive bone fragments were discovered in the 1800s. Like the Ost Cliff specimens, these too were misidentified and filed away in museum collections, their true nature and importance unrecognized for generations. The turning point in our understanding of giant ichthyosaurs came from a location called Lilstock, also in Somerset, England. In 2016, fossil collector Paul de la Salle was searching the beach at Lilstock when he discovered a series of massive bone fragments. Unlike earlier finds that had been misidentified, de la Salle suspected he had found something truly extraordinary. He carefully documented and collected the specimens, which consisted of a partial jawbone broken into several pieces. When joined together, these bone fragments formed a section of lower jaw nearly 1 meter, 3.3 feet, long, and critically, this represented only a portion of the complete jawbone. De La Salle reached out to paleontologists, including Dean Lomax from the University of Manchester, to help identify and study the remarkable find. Lomax and his colleagues recognized the bone as a surangula, a specific bone from the lower jaw of an ichthyosaur. What made this discovery particularly significant was both its enormous size and the fact that it could be precisely identified. By comparing this partial jawbone with complete specimens of known ichthyosaurs like Shonisaurus sicaniensis from Canada, the researchers could calculate the proportional size of the animal it came from. Their analysis, published in 2018, suggested that the Lilstock ichthyosaur might have reached a length of 25 to 26 meters, 82 to 85 feet, approaching the size of the largest blue whales. This was a stunning revelation, suggesting that ichthyosaurs had evolved to sizes previously thought impossible for marine reptiles. But the story doesn't end there. The recognition of the Lilstock specimen as a giant ichthyosaur prompted researchers to re-examine the older finds from Ost Cliff and Blue Anchor when Lomax and his team studied these long overlooked fossils. They realized that these too were from enormous ichthyosaurs, possibly even larger than the Lilstock specimen. The largest bone from Ost Cliff, when properly identified as another ichthyosaur surangula and scaled up to a complete animal, hinted at a truly colossal creature potentially exceeding 30 meters, 98 feet, in length. If this estimate is accurate, it would suggest an animal rivaling or even surpassing the largest known blue whales. These discoveries transformed our understanding of ichthyosaurs and raised profound questions about the upper size limits of marine life. They suggested that, contrary to long-held assumptions, the blue whale might not hold the title of the largest animal to have ever lived. Instead, that honor might belong to an ichthyosaur that swam in the oceans of the late Triassic more than 200 million years ago. The recognition of these giant ichthyosaurs is a powerful reminder of how science works, not as a collection of fixed facts, but as an evolving body of knowledge that changes as new evidence emerges. It also highlights the importance of museum collections, where specimens may wait decades or even centuries before their true significance is recognized. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us of how much we still have to learn about the history of life on our planet, even for groups of animals that have been studied for centuries. As news of these massive ichthyosaurs spread through the scientific community and beyond, they captured the imagination of both researchers and the public. But many questions remained. How accurate were these size estimates? What did these enormous animals eat? How did they evolve to such massive proportions? And could even larger specimens be waiting to be discovered? The search for answers would lead to new discoveries and new insights into these ocean giants of the Triassic world. The discovery of what would become known as the Lilstock monster represents one of those pivotal moments in paleontology when seemingly ordinary fieldwork leads to extraordinary findings that challenge established scientific understanding. The story begins on a cold day in May 2016 on the beach at Lilstock, Somerset, along England's southwestern coast. Paul de la Salle, an experienced amateur fossil collector, was conducting sort of his routine searches along this stretch of shoreline, known for its exposed Triassic and Jurassic rock formations. The area had yielded ichthyosaur fossils before, but nothing prepared de la Salle for what he was about to find. As he scanned the rocky foreshore, a peculiar bone fragment caught his eye. It was unusually large and had a distinctive texture and structure that suggested it might be something significant. After careful examination, de la Salle recognized it as potentially belonging to an ichthyosaur, but its massive size was puzzling. He continued searching the area and, remarkably, discovered several more large fragments that appeared to belong to the same bone. Over multiple visits to the site, he collected a series of these fragments, eventually assembling them into what was clearly part of an enormous jawbone. Recognizing the potential importance of his find, de la Salle photographed the bone fragments in situ before collecting them, providing valuable contextual information about their discovery. He then reached out to paleontologists Dean Lomax from the University of Manchester and Judy Massara from SUNY College at Brockport, both experts in ichthyosaur anatomy and evolution. When Lomax and Massara examined the assembled bone fragments, they were astonished. The specimen consisted of a partial surangula, a specific bone from the lower jaw of an ichthyosaur, measuring nearly 1 meter, 3.3 feet, in length. More significantly, this represented only a portion of the complete bone. Both ends were missing. The preserved section corresponded to the middle part of the surangula, with neither the front connection to the dentary bone nor the back articulation with the quadrate being present. To determine the identity and size of the animal this jaw fragment came from, Lomax and Massara compared it with surangular bones from other known ichthyosaur species. The bone's structure and distinctive features clearly identified it as belonging to a shastosaurid ichthyosaur, the same family that included the giant Shonisaurus from North America. In particular, they noted striking similarities to Shonisaurus sicaniensis from British Columbia, at that time considered the largest definitive ichthyosaur species. By comparing the proportions of the lilstock surangula to that of Shonisaurus sicaniensis, for which more complete remains existed, the researchers could estimate the total length of the animal. Their calculations suggested that the lilstock ichthyosaur would have measured between 25 and 26 meters, 82 to 85 feet, in length, approaching the size of a blue whale and significantly larger than any previously confirmed marine reptile. This size estimate was both shocking and controversial. If accurate, it meant that the lilstock specimen represented an animal potentially larger than most dinosaurs and rivaling the largest known vertebrates. The findings were published in 2018 in the scientific journal PLOS1, generating considerable interest among paleontologists and the wider public. The discovery was particularly significant because of its geological context. The lilstock fossil came from the Westbury Mudstone Formation, dated to the Ratian stage of the late Triassic period, approximately 205 to 201 million years ago. This was a time when marine reptiles were at their peak of diversity, and when the earliest dinosaurs were just beginning to diversify on land. The massive size of the lilstock ichthyosaur suggested that marine reptiles had achieved gigantism much earlier than previously thought, and had potentially reached sizes comparable to the largest animals of all time. Detailed examination of the bone provided additional insights into the animal's biology. The bone's internal structure showed evidence of sustained growth, suggesting the animal was still growing when it died. This raised the intriguing possibility that the Lilstock ichthyosaur might not even represent the maximum size these animals could reach. The Lilstock discovery prompted paleontologists to reconsider other large, fragmentary fossils from the same time period. In particular, it led to the re-examination of specimens from Aust Cliff and Blue Anchor in Somerset, which had been collected decades earlier but whose significance had not been fully appreciated. These specimens showed remarkable similarities to the Lilstock bone, suggesting they too came from giant ichthyosaurs. The public and media response to the Lilstock monster was immediate and enthusiastic. Here was tangible evidence challenging the long-held belief that the blue whale represented the absolute size limit for animal life. The discovery captured imaginations, appearing in news outlets worldwide and inspiring new artwork and reconstructions of these ocean giants. It also reignited interest in ichthyosaurs more broadly, highlighting the remarkable adaptations of these marine reptiles and their important role in Mesozoic marine ecosystems. For the scientific community, the Lilstock discovery raised fascinating questions about the physiological and ecological factors that enable gigantism in marine animals. What allowed these reptiles to grow so large? What ecological conditions supported such massive predators? And what might their existence tell us about the carry capacity and productivity of Triassic oceans? The discovery also highlighted the vital contribution that amateur fossil collectors make to paleontology. Without Paul de La Salle's experienced eye, careful collection techniques, and decision to contact academic researchers, this significant specimen might have been overlooked or its pieces separated and distributed, losing the vital context that made its identification possible. In the years following the initial publication, the Lilstock monster continued to be studied and debated. Some paleontologists questioned the size estimates, suggesting that scaling up from fragmentary remains involved too many assumptions to be reliable. Others pointed out that while the proportional scaling method used was standard practice in paleontology, it assumed that the giant Triassic ichthyosaurs maintained the same proportions as their better-known relatives, which might not be the case. Nevertheless, the Lilstock discovery established beyond doubt that enormous ichthyosaurs had existed in the late Triassic oceans of what is now Europe. It set the stage for further research and discoveries that would continue to refine our understanding of these massive marine reptiles and their place in the history of life on Earth. The Lilstock monster had forced paleontologists to reconsider what they thought they knew about the size limits of marine reptiles, and had opened the door to the possibility that the true record holders for the largest animals ever might have lived not in our recent past, but over 200 million years ago in the ancient Triassic seas. In April 2024, the paleontological world received exciting news that would finally give a proper name and scientific description to the enormous creature first glimpsed through the Lilstock jaw fragments. After years of detailed study, Dr. Dean Lomax and his colleagues, including the original discoverer Paul de la Salle, published a comprehensive analysis of the Lilstock fossils alongside other massive ichthyosaur remains from the United Kingdom. Their findings, published in the prestigious journal PLOS I, officially named this giant marine reptile Ichthyotitan sevenensis, a name that reflects both its enormous size and its geographical origin. The genus name Ichthyotitan combines the Greek words ichthys, fish, and titan, giant, literally meaning giant fish lizard, an apt description for what may have been the largest marine reptile ever to swim Earth's oceans. The species name Sevenensis refers to the Severn estuary, the region where the fossils were discovered, honoring the geographical context of this remarkable find. This formal scientific description represented the culmination of years of careful research. Since the initial discovery in 2016, Lomax and his team had been meticulously studying the Lilstock bones alongside other giant ichthyosaur specimens from the British Isles. They conducted detailed comparisons with better-known ichthyosaur species from around the world, analyzed the microscopic structure of the bones, and refined their understanding of the animal's size and proportions. The research that led to the naming of Ichthyotitan involved more than just the Lilstock specimens. The scientists also re-examined massive bones from other sites, particularly those from Orst Cliff near Bristol and Blue Anchor in Somerset. These specimens, some of which had been sitting in museum collections since the 19th century, were recognized as belonging to the same or closely related giant ichthyosaurs. One of the key advancements in the 2024 study was the detailed analysis of bone microstructure. By examining thin sections of the fossils under a microscope, the researchers identified unique features in the bone tissue that differentiated these giant ichthyosaurs from other marine reptiles and helped confirm their taxonomic relationships. This microstructural analysis revealed a distinctive intrinsic fiber matrix, a specialized bone structure that may have been an adaptation to support their enormous size. The study also provided refined estimates of just how large Ichthyotitan might have been. Based on proportional scaling from better-known ichthyosaur species and detailed measurements of the jaw fragments, the researchers estimated that Ichthyotitan sevenensis likely reached lengths of 22 to 26 meters, 72 to 85 feet. This places it in the size range of blue whales, which typically measure between 24 and 30 meters, 79 to 98 feet, though individual specimens can vary considerably. Even more intriguing were the size estimates for the specimen from Orst Cliff, which the researchers suggested might represent the same species or a closely related one. Some analyses suggested this individual could have reached lengths exceeding 30 meters, 98 feet, potentially making it larger than the largest reliably measured blue whales. However, the researchers were careful to emphasize the inherent uncertainty in these estimates. Scaling up from fragmentary remains involves assumptions about body proportions, and without more complete skeletons, precise size determinations remain challenging. Nevertheless, even the more conservative estimates placed Ichthyotitan among the largest animals ever to have lived, and the possibility remained that it could have exceeded the blue whale in size. What made the naming of Ichthyotitan particularly significant was that it formally recognized these giant Triassic ichthyosaurs as distinct from previously known species. While earlier research had compared the Lilstock specimen to Shonisaurus sicaniensis from Canada, the 2024 study established that the British giants represented a separate genus with unique anatomical features. The formal description also provided insights into the evolutionary relationships of these massive marine reptiles. Ichthyotitan belonged to the family Shastasauridae, a group of generally large ichthyosaurs that flourished in the late Triassic. Within this family, Ichthyotitan appears to be most closely related to giants like Shonisaurus from North America, suggesting that extreme gigantism evolved independently in several lineages of ichthyosaurs across different parts of the world's oceans. The habitat of Ichthyotitan severnensis would have been the shallow seas covering parts of what is now the United Kingdom during the late Triassic period, approximately 205 million years ago. At this time, the region formed part of an archipelago of islands on the edge of a shallow epicontinental sea. The waters were warm and highly productive, supporting diverse marine ecosystems that included numerous species of fish, ammonites, and other marine reptiles. The geological context of the Ichthyotitan fossils, the Westbury Mudstone Formation, represents an environment where fine sediments accumulated on the seafloor. This setting was ideal for preserving the remains of marine creatures that died and sank to the bottom. However, the scarcity of complete skeletons suggests that the carcasses of these enormous animals were often scattered by scavengers or current action before they could be fully buried and fossilized. With the formal naming of Ichthyotitan severnensis, these giant ichthyosaurs moved from paleontological curiosity to recognized members of the prehistoric fauna. The name provided a scientific handle that would facilitate further research and discussion about these remarkable animals and their place in Earth's evolutionary history. The publication also generated renewed public interest in giant ichthyosaurs and the broader question of which animal truly deserves the title of the largest ever. News of Ichthyotitan's naming spread rapidly through scientific journals, popular science publications, and mainstream media. Museums with specimens attributed to Ichthyotitan, including the Bristol Museum and Art Gallery, which houses some of the Orst Cliff material, saw increased interest in these previously overlooked fossils. Perhaps most importantly, the formal description of Ichthyotitan severnensis opened new avenues for research. With a named taxon established, paleontologists could more easily compare new discoveries to this species and refine their understanding of its anatomy, ecology, and evolutionary significance. The designation of type specimens, the specific fossils that define the species, provided reference points for identifying additional material that might belong to these giants. The story of Ichthyotitan reminds us that significant discoveries in paleontology don't always come from new excavations or exotic locations. Sometimes they come from careful re-examination of specimens that have been available for decades or even centuries, awaiting the right questions and analytical techniques to reveal their true significance. It's a testament to the ever-evolving nature of scientific knowledge and the constant refinement of our understanding of Earth's prehistoric past. As researchers continue to study Ichthyotitan and search for additional specimens, our knowledge of these ocean giants will undoubtedly grow. Each new discovery has the potential to further refine size estimates, provide insights into their biology and behavior, and help determine whether these massive marine reptiles truly were the largest animals ever to have lived. The naming of Ichthyotitan severnensis isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a new chapter in our understanding of these remarkable creatures from Earth's distant past. To understand what made Ichthyotitan and its relatives such successful ocean giants, we need to examine their remarkable anatomy. While our knowledge is limited by the fragmentary nature of the fossils, by studying these remains alongside more complete specimens of related ichthyosaurs, scientists can reconstruct a picture of how these colossal animals were built and how they functioned in their marine environment. Ichthyosaurs as a group had a distinctive body plan that has been compared to modern dolphins and tunas, a classic example of convergent evolution, where unrelated animals evolve similar forms in response to similar environmental pressures. This streamlined fish-like body was perfectly adapted for marine life, despite the fact that ichthyosaurs evolved from land-dwelling reptilian ancestors. For giants like Ichthyotitan, this basic ichthyosaurian body plan was scaled up to enormous proportions. Based on relationships to better-known relatives like Shonisaurus, Ichthyotitan likely had a torpedo-shaped body with a relatively small head, a moderately long snout, large eyes, and 4 flipper-like limbs. Its tail would have ended in a crescent-shaped fin that provided propulsion through the water. The skull of Ichthyotitan, though known only from fragments, offers fascinating insights into its biology. The massive surangular bone from Lilstock that led to the discovery of this genus was part of a complex jaw structure designed for feeding. In most ichthyosaurs, the jaws were elongated and filled with numerous conical teeth, adapted for catching slippery prey like fish and squid. However, in some giant ichthyosaurs of the Shastasaurid family, there's evidence that certain species reduced or even lost their teeth, potentially evolving a suction-feeding mechanism similar to modern beaked whales. Without more complete skull material from Ichthyotitan, we cannot be certain whether it retained teeth or had evolved a toothless feeding strategy. The massive size of its jaw suggests powerful feeding capabilities regardless of the specific mechanism, and researchers continue to search for additional skull material that might include teeth or tooth sockets to resolve this question. One of the most distinctive features of ichthyosaur anatomy was their eyes, which were typically larger relative to body size than those of any other vertebrate. Ichthyosaurus eyes were reinforced by rings of bony plates called sclerotic rings, which helped maintain the eye's shape against water pressure during deep dives. While we don't have the eye bones of Ichthyotitan, scaling from related species suggests they likely had eyes the size of dinner plates, potentially among the largest eyes of any animal in Earth's history. These massive eyes would have provided excellent vision, particularly in low-light conditions, suggesting Ichthyotitan may have been capable of diving to considerable depths where light penetration is reduced. Large eyes would have been advantageous for spotting prey in the murky Triassic seas and for navigating in their 3-dimensional underwater environment. The vertebral column of ichthyosaurs was composed of numerous disc-shaped vertebrae that allowed for lateral flexing of the body during swimming. In giant species like Ichthyotitan, these vertebrae would have been massive, providing attachment points for powerful swimming muscles. The vertebrae were also relatively lightweight despite their size, with hollows and channels that reduced mass while maintaining strength, a common adaptation in aquatic vertebrates. The limbs of Ichthyotitan, like those of other ichthyosaurs, had evolved into flipper-like structures. The front flippers were typically larger than the hind flippers and were the primary means of steering and stabilizing the body while swimming. The internal bone structure of these flippers was distinctive, with the individual finger bones, phalanges, multiplied and packed tightly together to form a rigid but hydrodynamic paddle. This adaptation, known as hyperphalangy, is also seen in modern whales and dolphins, representing another example of convergent evolution. Perhaps the most important anatomical feature for locomotion was the tail. Unlike most reptiles, which have tails that taper to a point, ichthyosaurs evolved a distinctive crescent-shaped tail fin similar to that of sharks and tunas. This vertical tail fin provided powerful propulsion through the water, with the vertebral column extending into the lower lobe of the fin, a configuration known as a heterocircle tail. This design allowed for efficient, sustained swimming over long distances. For a creature the size of Ichthyotitan, maintaining buoyancy would have been a critical challenge. Unlike modern whales, which use their lungs and specialized fats called blubber to remain neutrally buoyant, ichthyosaurs likely relied on different mechanisms. Their bodies may have contained specialized light tissues or air-filled sacs to offset the weight of their bones and muscles. The structure of their bones themselves, which were light yet strong, would have also contributed to buoyancy control. The internal organs of Ichthyotitan, though not preserved in fossils, can be inferred from both related ichthyosaurs and modern marine animals. Like all reptiles, they would have had lungs rather than gills, requiring them to surface periodically to breathe air. Their massive size would have conferred an advantage in this regard, as larger animals can generally hold their breath longer due to their lower metabolic rate relative to body size. Their circulatory system would have needed to be highly efficient to support their enormous body, with adaptations for managing oxygen during prolonged dives. These might have included increased blood volume, higher concentrations of oxygen-binding proteins, and specialized networks of blood vessels to conserve oxygen for vital organs during dives. One of the most remarkable aspects of giant ichthyosaur anatomy relates to reproduction. Unlike many reptiles, ichthyosaurs did not lay eggs, but gave birth to live young in the water, a fact confirmed by numerous fossils of ichthyosaurs preserved in the process of giving birth or with embryos inside their bodies. This adaptation eliminated the need to return to land for reproduction, allowing ichthyosaurs to become fully aquatic. For a creature as large as Ichthyotitan, reproduction would have been a significant energy investment. Based on smaller ichthyosaurs, they likely gave birth to a single large offspring, or perhaps a small number of relatively well-developed young, rather than numerous small offspring. The young would have been immediately capable of swimming and feeding themselves, though parental care cannot be ruled out. The sensory systems of Ichthyotitan would have been tuned for marine life. Beyond their enormous eyes, they likely possessed good hearing adapted for underwater conditions. Whether they had additional sensory capabilities, like the ability to detect electrical fields, electroreception, or pressure changes, remains speculative, but plausible given their fully aquatic lifestyle. What emerges from our understanding of ichthyosaur anatomy is a picture of an animal exquisitely adapted for marine life despite its terrestrial ancestry. Ichthyotitan represented the pinnacle of this adaptation, scaling the basic ichthyosaurian body plan to dimensions that rivaled or potentially exceeded the largest animals alive today. Their anatomy reflects millions of years of evolution in the marine environment, resulting in a creature that, despite being a reptile, converged on body forms seen in modern marine mammals and large fish. The remarkable convergence between ichthyosaurs and modern cetaceans, whales and dolphins, highlights how the physical constraints of marine life tend to produce similar solutions across vastly different animal groups. Despite being separated by over 150 million years and evolving from completely different ancestral groups, ichthyosaurs and cetaceans independently evolved streamlined bodies, reduced limbs, powerful tails, live birth, and numerous other adaptations for life in the ocean. As research continues and potentially more complete specimens of Ichthyotitan are discovered, our understanding of the anatomy of these ocean giants will undoubtedly be refined and expanded. For now, the fragmentary remains provide tantalizing glimpses of what may have been the largest marine reptile and possibly the largest animal ever to have lived. Understanding how paleontologists determine the size and nature of extinct animals from fragmentary fossils requires delving into the meticulous scientific analyses conducted on specimens like those of Ichthyotitan. The story of how researchers confirmed the enormous size of these animals is a fascinating journey into modern paleontological methods and the subtle clues preserved in ancient bones. One of the most significant advances in the study of giant ichthyosaurs came from detailed analyses of bone microstructure. When paleontologists examine thin sections of fossilized bone under a microscope, they can observe the arrangement of bone cells, blood vessels, and growth lines that provide insights into how the animal grew, how old it was when it died, and even its metabolic rate. These microscopic features can also help distinguish different types of animals and confirm the identity of fragmentary remains. In the case of Ichthyotitan and other giant ichthyosaurs from the United Kingdom, researchers identified a unique bone microstructure they termed an intrinsic fiber matrix. This distinctive arrangement of bone fibers was consistent across specimens from Lilstock, Ostcliffe, and Blue Anchor, confirming they belonged to closely related animals. Moreover, this microstructure was not found in contemporaneous dinosaur bones or other marine reptiles, supporting the identification of these fossils as belonging to giant shastosaurid ichthyosaurs. The microstructural analysis revealed that the bone was highly vascularized, meaning it contained numerous channels for blood vessels. This suggests these animals had high metabolic rates, more similar to modern marine mammals than to typical cold-blooded reptiles. The orientation of collagen fibers within the bone indicated adaptations for withstanding the mechanical stresses of marine life. particularly the forces generated during powerful swimming movements. Growth rings visible in the bone, similar to the rings in a tree trunk, provided insights into the growth patterns of these enormous animals. Analysis of these growth lines indicated that the Lil-stock specimen was still growing at the time of death, despite already being of enormous size. This suggests that the animal had not yet reached its maximum potential size, a tantalizing hint that even larger individuals might have existed. Comparative anatomy played a crucial role in the scientific analysis of Ichthyotitan. By comparing the partial jaw bones from England with more complete specimens of related ichthyosaurs like Shonisaurus from North America, researchers could establish proportional relationships that allowed for size estimations. This process, known as scaling, is a standard method in paleontology for estimating the size of incomplete specimens. The process works by identifying bones that are anatomically identical between different specimens, measuring the ratio between these bones and the overall body length in well-preserved specimens, and then applying this ratio to the fragmentary remains. For example, if the surangular bone represents a specific percentage of total body length in Shonisaurus sicaniensis, then a surangular from Ichthyotitan can be scaled proportionally to estimate its total length. This scaling approach is not without limitations. It assumes that body proportions remain constant as animals increase in size, which is not always the case. Very large animals often have different proportions than smaller relatives due to the physical constraints of their size. Recognizing this, researchers applied multiple scaling methods and made conservative assumptions to avoid overestimating the size of Ichthyotitan. Another important analytical approach involved functional morphology, studying the shape and structure of bones to understand how they functioned in the living animal. The massive jaw bones of Ichthyotitan showed features consistent with powerful biting or suction-feeding capabilities. The robust construction of these bones, with thick cortical bone, the dense outer layer, and reinforcing internal structures suggested they could withstand significant mechanical stresses during feeding. Taphonomic analysis, the study of how organisms decay and become fossilized, provided additional context for the Ichthyotitan remains. The fragmentary nature of the fossils and their discovery in marine sedimentary rocks tell us about the environment in which these animals lived and died. The bones show evidence of having been exposed on the seafloor for some time before burial, with signs of abrasion and bioerosion, damage from other organisms like scavengers or boring invertebrates. This exposure likely contributed to the scattered and incomplete nature of the remains. Three-dimensional modeling and computational approaches have supplemented traditional analytical methods. By creating digital models of the fossil bones and comparing them with complete ichthyosaur skeletons, researchers can visualize how these fragments would have fit into the complete animal. These models can be manipulated and scaled to test different hypotheses about body proportions and total size. Advanced imaging techniques have also revealed details not visible to the naked eye. CT scanning computed tomography allowed researchers to examine the internal structure of the bones without damaging them. This technique was particularly valuable for studying the bone microstructure and identifying features that confirmed the identity of these fossils as giant ichthyosaurs. Geochemical analyses of the fossilized bone provided insights into the environmental conditions and possibly the diet of ichthyotitan. By examining the isotopic composition of the elements like oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen preserved in the fossil, scientists can infer information about the animal's physiology, habitat, and position in the food web. These chemical signatures act as a kind of fingerprint that reflects the environment in which the animal lived. One of the most important aspects of the scientific analysis was the process of peer review and scientific consensus building. The initial discovery and interpretation of the Lilstock specimen in 2016 to 2018 was subjected to rigorous scrutiny by other experts in marine reptile paleontology. Some questioned the size estimates or the identification of the bones, leading to further research and analysis that ultimately strengthened the case for these being remains of truly gigantic ichthyosaurs. The formal naming of Ichthyotitan severnensis in 2024 represented the culmination of this scientific process. By this point, the researchers had addressed many of the initial questions and uncertainties, building a robust case for the existence of ichthyosaurs that rivaled or potentially exceeded blue whales in size. The publication of this research in a peer-reviewed scientific journal established Ichthyotitan as a valid taxon that other researchers could reference and build upon in future studies. Perhaps the most significant conclusion from the scientific analysis of Ichthyotitan relates to the maximum size potential of marine tetrapods, four-limbed vertebrates. Prior to these discoveries, it was widely believed that the blue whale represented the upper size limit for animal life, constrained by the physics of body support, nutrient acquisition, and physiological functions like circulation and respiration. The existence of ichthyosaurs approaching or potentially exceeding this size suggests that multiple lineages of marine animals have independently evolved extreme gigantism, pushing against these theoretical limits. This has profound implications for our understanding of evolutionary processes and biological constraints. If different animal groups with distinct ancestries and physiologies, Mesozoic marine reptiles and Cenozoic marine mammals, have independently reached similar maximum sizes, this suggests that the upper size limit for marine animals may be determined more by physical and ecological factors than by the specific biology of the lineage in question. As scientific analysis of Ichthyotitan and other giant ichthyosaurs continues, our understanding will undoubtedly be refined. New discoveries, improved analytical techniques, and novel approaches may shed further light on these remarkable animals and their place in the history of life on Earth. The story of giant ichthyosaurs reminds us that even after centuries of paleontological research, significant discoveries remain to be made, discoveries that can challenge our assumptions about the limits and patterns of life's evolution. For almost a century, the blue whale, Balænoptera musculus, has held the undisputed title of the largest animal to have ever lived, with authenticated specimens reaching lengths of 29.9 meters, 98 feet, and weights estimated at up to 190 metric tons. These magnificent marine mammals have long been considered the pinnacle of animal size. Their enormous dimensions have been cited in countless books, documentaries, and museum exhibits as an example of the upper limits of how large an animal can theoretically grow. But the discovery of giant ichthyosaurs like Ichthyotitan has raised a compelling question. Did these Triassic marine reptiles actually grow larger than blue whales, requiring us to rewrite the record books? To answer this question, we need to carefully examine the evidence and the methods used to estimate the size of extinct animals based on fragmentary remains. The most direct size comparison comes from scaling the partial remains of Ichthyotitan to estimate its total length. Based on the nearly 1 meter long partial surangular bone from Lilstock, and using proportional scaling from better-known relatives like Shonisaurus sicaniensis, researchers estimated that Ichthyotitan sevenensis likely reached lengths of 22 to 26 meters, 72 to 85 feet. This range places it within the size spectrum of blue whales, though toward the smaller end of their maximum recorded sizes. However, the even larger bones from Aust Cliff, which may represent the same species or a closely related giant ichthyosaur, hint at potentially even more massive individuals. Some analyses suggest these remains could have come from an animal exceeding 30 meters, 98 feet, in length, which would place it among the largest blue whales ever recorded, or possibly even beyond them. These estimates must be considered in the context of their inherent uncertainty. Scaling from fragmentary remains involves a cascade of assumptions, each introducing potential error. Small differences in how the scaling is calculated can lead to significant differences in the final size estimate. Recognizing this, researchers typically present a range of potential sizes rather than a single definitive measurement. When comparing the sizes of extinct and living animals, it's important to consider not just length, but also mass and volume. Blue whales are not just long, they are also enormously bulky, with a body plan optimized for maximum size. Their weight of up to 190 metric tons represents a mass greater than that of 30 elephants combined. Without more complete remains of Ichthyotitan, estimating its mass is even more challenging than estimating its length. Based on body proportions of related ichthyosaurs, Ichthyotitan was likely somewhat more slender than a blue whale relative to its length. This suggests that even if some individuals reached similar or slightly greater lengths than blue whales, they might still have been less massive overall. However, this remains speculative without more complete skeletal material to provide a clearer picture of body proportions. Another factor to consider is the natural variation within species. Both blue whales and ichthyosaurs would have had a range of sizes in their populations, with most individuals being somewhat smaller than the maximum possible size. The largest blue whale ever accurately measured was 29.9 meters, 98 feet, long, but most adults are somewhat smaller, with females averaging around 25 meters, 82 feet, and males being slightly smaller still. Similarly, the ichthyosaur specimens we've discovered may not represent the absolute largest individuals that ever lived. It's statistically unlikely that the few fragmentary fossils we've found happen to come from the largest individuals of the species. This raises the intriguing possibility that even larger specimens might await discovery, or might have existed but never been preserved as fossils. The question of which animal was truly larger becomes even more complex when we consider that different animals may have different proportions that affect how we perceive and measure size. For instance, The enormous tail flukes of blue whales contribute significantly to their total length, while the tail fins of ichthyosaurs had different proportions. Should we be comparing total length, body length excluding appendages, or some other metric? To address these complications, some researchers prefer to focus on more directly comparable measurements, such as skull length or the dimensions of specific bones that serve similar functions across different animal groups. By these metrics, the evidence suggests that the largest ichthyosaurs had skull and jaw dimensions approaching or similar to those of blue whales, supporting the case that they were indeed comparable in size. The age of the specimens introduces another fascinating element to the comparison. Growth line analysis of the Lilstock specimen indicates it was still growing when it died. If this immature individual was already approaching the size of an adult blue whale, how large might it have grown had it survived to full maturity? This hints at the tantalizing possibility that the maximum theoretical size of ichthyosaurs might have exceeded that of blue whales, even if the specific specimens we've discovered did not. From an evolutionary perspective, the fact that marine reptiles potentially reached sizes comparable to the largest cetaceans is remarkable given the different ancestries and physiologies of these groups. Blue whales are mammals with high metabolic rates, specialized feeding adaptations for consuming krill, and a suite of anatomical and physiological adaptations that evolved over approximately 50 million years of cetacean evolution. In contrast, ichthyosaurs evolved from terrestrial reptilian ancestors and developed their marine adaptations and enormous size over a similar time frame, but from a completely different starting point. That they potentially reached size parity with blue whales suggests that the upper limits of marine animal size may be determined more by physical constraints and ecological factors than by the specific biology of the lineage in question. The comparison between blue whales and giant ichthyosaurs is further complicated by the different ecological roles these animals played. Blue whales are filter feeders that consume enormous quantities of tiny krill, a feeding strategy that supports their massive size by providing access to an abundant food source. The feeding ecology of giant ichthyosaurs is less well understood, but they were likely predators of fish, cephalopods, and possibly other marine reptiles. A different ecological niche that would have presented its own opportunities and constraints for body size evolution. As research continues and analytical methods improve, our understanding of the relative sizes of blue whales and giant ichthyosaurs will likely become more refined. New discoveries could potentially settle the question more definitively, particularly if more complete remains of giant ichthyosaurs are found. For now, the weight of evidence suggests that the largest ichthyosaurs were indeed in the same size class as blue whales, potentially approaching or matching their dimensions. Whether they actually exceeded blue whales in size remains an open question, with current data providing tantalizing hints, but not conclusive proof. Perhaps the most significant aspect of this size comparison is not determining a definitive winner in the contest for the largest animal ever, but rather recognizing that extreme gigantism has evolved independently in different marine vertebrate lineages. This convergent evolution toward massive size in both marine mammals and marine reptiles tells us something profound about the opportunities and constraints of life in the ocean environment. The ocean, with its buoyant support, abundant food resources, and three-dimensional habitat, has repeatedly enabled the evolution of giants. That different animal groups with distinct ancestries and physiologies have independently reached similar maximum sizes suggests that the ocean environment itself may set the upper limits for animal size rather than the specific biology of any particular lineage. As we contemplate the enormous dimensions of both blue whales and giant ichthyosaurs, we're reminded of the extraordinary scale that life can achieve under the right conditions. Whether Ichthyotitan ultimately proves to be slightly smaller than, equal to, or larger than the blue whale, its discovery has forever changed our understanding of the potential size limits of marine reptiles and challenged our assumptions about which animal truly deserves the title of the largest to have ever lived. Understanding how an animal as enormous as Ichthyotitan fed is crucial to comprehending its ecology and evolutionary success. What could possibly sustain a marine reptile of such colossal proportions, and how did it capture and consume its prey? While direct evidence of feeding behavior is limited by the fragmentary nature of the fossils, careful analysis of jaw structure, comparisons with related species, and the broader ecological context of late Triassic oceans provide fascinating insights into the hunting and feeding strategies of these ocean giants. One of the central questions about giant ichthyosaurs like Ichthyotitan concerns whether they possessed teeth. This seemingly simple anatomical detail has profound implications for their feeding strategy. Among the Shastasauridae, the family to which Ichthyotitan belongs, there is evidence for both toothed and apparently toothless species. For instance, Shonisaurus popularis from Nevada appears to have had reduced dentition or possibly no teeth at all in adults, while some other large ichthyosaurs retained formidable teeth throughout their lives. Without more complete skull material from Ichthyotitan that would preserve tooth sockets or teeth themselves, we cannot be certain which condition it exhibited. However, recent discoveries have shed light on this question for related giant ichthyosaurs. A study published in 2021 reported on new fossils of Shastasaurus, another giant ichthyosaur, revealing that contrary to previous interpretations, it did possess teeth. This finding challenges earlier hypotheses that all giant ichthyosaurs were toothless suction feeders and suggests that a toothed condition might have been more widespread among these animals than previously thought. If Ichthyotitan did possess teeth, they were likely conical in shape and adapted for grasping rather than crushing or tearing. Such teeth would have been ideal for capturing slippery prey like fish and squid-like cephalopods, which were abundant in Triassic seas. The teeth might have functioned primarily to capture and hold prey rather than for extensive processing, with prey likely swallowed whole or in large pieces. Evidence supporting the predatory nature of giant ichthyosaurs comes from several sources. Particularly illuminating is the discovery of the stomach contents of a large Triassic ichthyosaur from Alaska, which revealed a diet of fish and mollusks. Even more remarkable is evidence from Guizhouichthyosaurus tangae, a Chinese ichthyosaur that, while smaller than Ichthyotitan at about 5 meters in length, provides direct evidence of predation on large prey. One specimen was found with the remains of a 4-meter-long thalattosaur, another marine reptile, in its stomach area, indicating that it had swallowed an animal nearly its own size shortly before death. This discovery is particularly significant because it demonstrates that at least some ichthyosaurs were capable of tackling very large prey relative to their own size. If Ichthyotitan shared this capacity, it might have been capable of preying upon other marine reptiles, including smaller ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and nothosaurs that inhabited the same waters. The enormous size of Ichthyotitan would have made it capable of consuming prey that would be challenging or impossible for smaller predators to handle. Whether toothed or toothless, the sheer size of Ichthyotitan's jaws would have made it a formidable predator. If it employed a suction-feeding strategy similar to that suggested for some other giant ichthyosaurs, it would have been able to rapidly expand its oral cavity to create negative pressure, drawing prey into its mouth along with a rush of water. This feeding method is seen in modern whales like belugas and pilot whales, and is particularly effective for capturing prey in low visibility conditions or for gathering multiple small prey items simultaneously. Alternatively, if Ichthyotitan was a more active pursuit predator with a full complement of teeth, it might have employed a strategy more similar to that of modern dolphins or orcas, chasing down prey and grasping it with its jaws before swallowing. The enormous eyes typical of ichthyosaurs suggest excellent vision that would have been advantageous for visually locating prey, particularly in the clear, shallow seas that covered parts of what is now the United Kingdom during the late Triassic. The diet of Ichthyotitan likely included a variety of marine creatures available in late Triassic oceans. Fossils from the same formations where Ichthyotitan remains were found reveal a diverse marine ecosystem that included numerous fish species, ammonites, shelled cephalopods similar to modern nautilus, belemnites, squid-like cephalopods, and various marine reptiles. This rich biodiversity would have provided ample food resources for a top predator like Ichthyotitan. Given its massive size, Ichthyotitan would have required substantial amounts of food to sustain itself. Modern blue whales, which are filter feeders, consume up to 3.6 metric tons of krill daily during feeding season. While Ichthyotitan likely had a lower metabolic rate as a reptile compared to mammals like blue whales, it would still have needed to consume large quantities of prey to maintain its enormous body. This raises interesting questions about the productivity of Triassic oceans and whether they could support multiple individuals of such massive predators. The presence of these giants suggests that late Triassic marine ecosystems were highly productive, with abundant food resources flowing through complex food webs. The hunting behavior of Ichthyotitan would have been influenced by its physiological capabilities. While traditionally reptiles have been viewed as cold-blooded, ectothermic, recent research suggests that large marine reptiles like ichthyosaurs might have maintained elevated body temperatures through a combination of large body size, which reduces heat loss relative to volume, and specialized circulatory adaptations. This potential for some degree of endothermy, warm-bloodedness, would have significant implications for hunting behavior. An animal capable of maintaining a higher, more stable body temperature could sustain more active hunting strategies, potentially including pursuit of prey over longer distances or in cooler waters. The highly vascularized bone structure observed in Ichthyotitan fossils is consistent with an elevated metabolic rate. supporting the possibility of more active hunting behaviors than might be expected in a typical reptile. The locomotive capabilities of Ichthyotitan would also have influenced its hunting strategies. Like other ichthyosaurs, it propelled itself primarily using its powerful tail fin, with the flippers providing stability and directional control. While its enormous size might have limited its acceleration and maneuverability compared to the smaller relatives, it could likely still achieve respectable swimming speeds once in motion. Modern whales of comparable size can reach speeds of 20 to 30 kilometers per hour, 12 to 19 miles per hour, in short bursts, and Ichthyotitan might have had similar capabilities. This combination of size, power, and reasonable speed would have made Ichthyotitan a versatile predator capable of exploiting various hunting strategies. It might have employed ambush tactics in some situations, using its large size to its advantage by lurking in deeper water and rising to capture prey silhouetted against the surface. In other situations, it might have actively patrolled productive feeding grounds, using its excellent vision to locate concentrations of prey. The social behavior of Ichthyotitan remains unknown, but by examining related ichthyosaurs and modern marine predators, we can consider the possibilities. Some ichthyosaur species show evidence of group behavior, with multiple individuals preserved together in fossil deposits. If Ichthyotitan exhibited social behaviors, it might have hunted cooperatively, with groups of individuals working together to corral schools of fish or to tackle especially large prey, a strategy observed in modern orcas and some shark species. Alternatively, these giants might have been primarily solitary, coming together only for mating or perhaps congregating in areas of particularly abundant food resources. The massive energy requirements of such large animals might have favored solitary hunting to reduce competition for prey within the species. The potential for predator-prey relationships between different giant marine reptiles in the late Triassic oceans presents a fascinating ecological scenario, with multiple large predators inhabiting the same waters, including various ichthyosaur species and other marine reptiles. Complex interactions and potential competition for resources would have shaped the evolutionary trajectories of these animals. As we piece together the hunting and feeding strategies of Ichthyotitan from fragmentary fossils and comparative evidence, we glimpse a remarkable predator that dominated late Triassic seas. Whether specialized for suction feeding or equipped with formidable teeth for capturing large prey, this ocean giant represents the apex of marine predation in its time, a testament to the evolutionary potential of reptiles adapted to life in the sea. The discovery of additional fossil material, particularly skull elements that might preserve teeth or tooth sockets, would further illuminate the feeding ecology of these extraordinary animals and enhance our understanding of their role in ancient marine ecosystems. The evolution of gigantism in marine animals is a fascinating story of adaptation and opportunity, and the case of Ichthyotitan and other massive ichthyosaurs provides a compelling chapter in this evolutionary narrative. To understand how these animals achieved such enormous sizes, we need to trace the evolutionary history of ichthyosaurs and examine the factors that drove their remarkable size increase. Ichthyosaurs first appeared in the fossil record during the early Triassic period, approximately 250 million years ago, relatively soon after the devastating Permian-Triassic mass extinction that had wiped out around 96% of marine species. This timing is significant, as the extinction had created ecological vacancies in marine ecosystems, opening new opportunities for the survivors and their descendants to diversify and occupy previously unavailable niches. The earliest ichthyosaurs, such as Cartohynchus and Chaohusaurus from China, were relatively small animals, typically less than 1 meter, 3.3 feet, in length. These primitive forms still showed clear connections to their terrestrial ancestry, with less streamlined bodies and more lizard-like proportions than their later descendants. However, they already displayed adaptations for aquatic life, including flipper-like limbs and bodies adapted for swimming. Over the next 15 to 20 million years, ichthyosaurs underwent a remarkable evolutionary radiation, diversifying into numerous species and rapidly increasing in size. By the Middle Triassic, approximately 235 million years ago, substantially larger ichthyosaurs had evolved, including species like Cymbospondylus, which reached lengths of around 10 meters, 33 feet. These Middle Triassic forms had more streamlined fish-like bodies than their ancestors, showing increased adaptation to a fully aquatic lifestyle. The trend toward increased size continued through the Middle and into the late Triassic, culminating in the Shastosaurid ichthyosaurs, the family that includes the giants like Shonisaurus and Ichthyotitan. This rapid evolution toward gigantism is remarkable for its pace. In less than 30 million years, ichthyosaurs had evolved from modest-sized nearshore animals to ocean giants that potentially rivaled the largest animals ever to have lived. What drove this extraordinary increase in size? Several factors likely contributed to the evolution of gigantism in ichthyosaurs. One key factor was the physical properties of the marine environment itself. Water provides buoyant support that reduces the constraints of gravity on body size. On land, very large animals require substantial skeletal adaptations to support their weight, but in water, the buoyant force significantly offsets body weight, allowing for larger sizes without proportional increases in skeletal support structures. This buoyant support is one reason why the largest animals, both living and extinct, have been marine creatures. The physical properties of water create an environment where gigantism is more readily achievable than on land, where gravitational constraints are more limiting. Ichthyosaurs, having returned to the sea, were freed from these constraints and could evolve larger body sizes than their terrestrial ancestors. Another critical factor in the evolution of giant ichthyosaurs was likely related to energetics and thermal regulation. Larger animals have a lower surface area to volume ratio, which reduces heat loss relative to body mass. This relationship, known as Bergmann's rule, means that larger animals can more easily maintain stable body temperatures, particularly in cool environments like ocean waters. For ichthyosaurs, evolving larger body sizes may have provided thermoregulatory advantages, allowing them to maintain higher and more stable body temperatures than smaller relatives. This would have been particularly advantageous for active predators, as higher body temperatures generally support increased muscle performance and metabolic function. While ichthyosaurs were reptiles, there is evidence suggesting they may have been partially endothermic, warm-blooded. and larger size would have facilitated this physiological strategy. Ecological opportunities and competitive pressures also likely played a role in driving ichthyosaur gigantism. As apex predators, larger size would have expanded the range of potential prey species available to these animals. Larger predators can tackle larger prey, accessing food resources that smaller competitors cannot utilize. This ability to exploit different prey resources can reduce competition and provide access to more abundant or energy-rich food sources. The late Triassic oceans appear to have been highly productive ecosystems with abundant food resources, creating an environment where large predators could thrive. The diversity of potential prey species, including numerous fish, cephalopods, and other marine reptiles, would have provided the energy input necessary to sustain animals of such enormous size. Evolutionary arms races between predators and prey might also have contributed to increased size in ichthyosaurs. As prey species evolved defenses against predation, predators would have been under selective pressure to evolve counter-adaptations, potentially including larger size that would allow them to overpower prey defenses. Similarly, competition between different predator species might have driven size increases as a means of reducing direct competition or establishing competitive dominance. The evolution of reproductive strategies in ichthyosaurs likely played a role in their size evolution as well. Unlike many reptiles that lay eggs, ichthyosaurs gave birth to live young in the water, a fact confirmed by numerous fossils of ichthyosaurs preserved in the process of giving birth or with embryos inside their bodies. This adaptation eliminated the need to return to land for reproduction, allowing for increased body size without the constraints that egg-laying would impose. Larger body size in female ichthyosaurs might have conferred reproductive advantages, allowing them to produce larger or more numerous offspring. Larger young would have had better survival prospects in the dangerous marine environment, potentially creating a selective pressure favoring increased maternal size. The pattern of ichthyosaur evolution shows that gigantism evolved independently in multiple lineages within the group, suggesting that the advantages of large size were significant, and that the marine environment of the Triassic presented few constraints on size increase. This parallel evolution toward gigantism in different ichthyosaur lineages represents a form of convergent evolution where similar selective pressures lead to similar adaptations in separate evolutionary lines. Interestingly, after reaching their peak of gigantism in the late Triassic, with species like Ichthyotitan, ichthyosaurs generally decreased in maximum size during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. While still large by most standards, typically reaching 3 to 10 meters, 10 to 33 feet, in length, these later ichthyosaurs did not approach the extreme dimensions of their Triassic predecessors. This trend suggests that ecological conditions may have changed, altering the selective pressures that had previously favored extreme gigantism. This pattern of ichthyosaur size evolution contrasts with that seen in cetaceans, whales, and dolphins, which evolved from terrestrial mammalian ancestors much later, during the early Cenozoic era. Cetaceans showed a more gradual increase in maximum size over their evolutionary history, with the largest species, blue whales, representing a relatively recent development, that appeared only within the past few million years. The fact that ichthyosaurs and cetaceans independently evolved toward gigantism despite their vastly different ancestries and times of evolution suggests that the marine environment consistently presents opportunities for the evolution of extremely large body sizes. This convergent evolution toward gigantism in unrelated marine lineages tells us something profound about the opportunities and constraints of life in the ocean. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of giant ichthyosaurs like Ichthyotitan is how rapidly they achieved such enormous sizes in evolutionary terms. From their origins as modest-sized semi-aquatic reptiles to ocean giants rivaling blue whales took less than 45 million years. A blink of an eye in geological terms. This rapid size increase suggests that when ecological opportunities arise and constraints are reduced, evolution can produce dramatic changes in relatively short time frames. The study of how giant ichthyosaurs evolved continues to yield insights into the processes and patterns of evolution more broadly. By understanding the factors that drove and enabled extreme gigantism in these ancient marine reptiles, we gain perspective on the evolutionary potential of life and the diverse pathways that adaptation can take in response to environmental opportunities and challenges. To fully appreciate the significance of Ichthyotitan and its giant relatives, we need to understand the world they inhabited, the marine ecosystems of the late Triassic period, approximately 205 million years ago. This was a time very different from our own, with a dramatically different global geography, climate, and complement of living species that created the conditions in which these enormous marine reptiles evolved and thrived. During the late Triassic, Earth's landmasses were united into a single supercontinent called Pangaea, surrounded by a vast global ocean called Panthalassa. This geographical configuration had profound implications for ocean circulation, climate patterns, and the distribution of marine life. Without the complex arrangement of continents and ocean basins we see today, ocean currents follow different patterns, creating distinctive regimes of temperature and nutrient distribution. What is now the United Kingdom, where Ichthyotitan fossils have been found, was located at approximately 30 degrees north latitude during the late Triassic, roughly the same latitude as modern-day Egypt or Texas. However, the climate was quite different from these modern locations. The late Triassic was generally warmer than the present day, with higher atmospheric CO2 levels creating greenhouse conditions. There were no permanent polar ice caps, and warm, equable temperatures extended much further toward the poles than they do today. The area that would become the British Isles formed part of an archipelago of islands on the eastern edge of the massive Pangaean landmass. This region was covered by shallow epicontinental seas, relatively shallow marine waters extending over continental crust. These seas were warm, productive environments that supported diverse marine ecosystems, making them ideal habitats for large marine reptiles like Ichthyotitan. The marine environment where Ichthyotitan lived, preserved in what is now the Westbury Mudstone Formation, represents a shallow sea with a muddy bottom. Sedimentological evidence suggests these were relatively calm waters with periodic storms that disturbed the seafloor. The fine-grained sediments that formed these mudstones created an environment where delicate fossils could be preserved, giving us a window into this ancient marine ecosystem. the oceans of the late Triassic teemed with life, including a remarkable diversity of marine reptiles. Besides the giant ichthyosaurs like Ichthyotitan, these seas were home to numerous other ichthyosaur species of various sizes, each adapted to different ecological niches. Some were specialized for hunting fast-moving prey in open waters, while others may have focused on different prey types or hunting strategies. Plesiosaurs, another major group of marine reptiles, were beginning their evolutionary radiation during this time. These long-necked animals, with their 4 paddle-like limbs and distinctive body plan, would become more diverse and abundant in the subsequent Jurassic period, but had already established themselves in late Triassic seas. Their hunting strategies, focusing on smaller prey captured with their long, flexible necks, complemented rather than directly competed with those of the larger ichthyosaurs. Nothosaurs, placodonts, and other more primitive marine reptiles still persisted in the late Triassic, particularly in shallow coastal environments. These groups represented earlier waves of reptilian adaptation to marine life and occupied different ecological niches than the more specialized ichthyosaurs. Fish diversity in the late Triassic oceans was high, with numerous species of both cartilaginous fish, related to modern sharks and rays, and bony fish. Many of these would have served as prey for predators like Ichthyotitan. Particularly abundant were fish from the groups Palaeoniciformes and Saurichthyoformes, some of which grew to substantial sizes themselves. Shellfish and other invertebrates were diverse and abundant, including ammonites, shelled cephalopods related to modern nautilus, squid, and octopus, belemnites, squid-like cephalopods, bivalves, gastropods, and various crustaceans. These invertebrates formed the middle and lower tiers of the marine food web, serving as prey for fish and smaller marine reptiles, which in turn were prey for larger predators like Ichthyotitan. The primary producers at the base of this marine food web were various types of phytoplankton, including early diatoms, dinoflagellates, and other microbial photosynthesizers. These organisms captured the energy of sunlight and converted it into the biological energy that flowed through the entire ecosystem. The productivity of these primary producers ultimately determined how many large predators like Ichthyotitan the ecosystem could support. Evidence suggests that the late Triassic oceans were highly productive, particularly in coastal and shelf environments. Upwelling zones, where nutrient-rich deep water rises to the surface, would have created localized areas of exceptional productivity that could support high concentrations of marine life. These productive areas would have been particularly important hunting grounds for large predators like Ichthyotitan. The food web of the late Triassic oceans would have been complex, with energy flowing from primary producers through multiple trophic levels before reaching apex predators like Ichthyotitan. At the top of this food web, giant ichthyosaurs would have had few, if any, predators once they reached adult size, though juveniles would have been vulnerable to various large predatory fish and other marine reptiles. The interactions between different top predators in this ecosystem would have been fascinating. With multiple species of large marine reptiles occupying similar ecological niches, competition for resources might have been intense. This competitive pressure could have driven specialization, with different predators focusing on different prey types, or hunting in different parts of the marine environment to reduce direct competition. The late Triassic was also a time of significant environmental fluctuations. Evidence from sedimentary rocks and fossil assemblages suggests periods of ocean anoxia oxygen depletion occurred in some regions. These events, potentially triggered by changes in ocean circulation or episodes of intense global warming, would have stressed marine ecosystems and potentially influenced the evolution and distribution of large marine predators like ichthyotitan. Climate fluctuations during the late Triassic would have affected ocean temperatures, sea levels, and patterns of marine productivity. These changes would have influenced the distribution and abundance of the prey species that sustained giant ichthyosaurs, potentially leading to shifts in their geographic range and population density over time. The geological record from this period also shows evidence of periodic mass mortality events, where large numbers of marine organisms died simultaneously. These events, possibly triggered by harmful algal blooms, sudden temperature changes, or other environmental perturbations, would have periodically disrupted marine food webs and tested the resilience of species across multiple trophic levels. The world of ichthyotitan was coming toward the end of an era. The late Triassic period concluded with a significant extinction event approximately 201 million years ago, coinciding with massive volcanic eruptions associated with the breakup of Pangaea. This end Triassic extinction profoundly affected marine ecosystems, leading to the disappearance of many species and setting the stage for new evolutionary radiations in the subsequent Jurassic period. While giant ichthyosaurs like Ichthyotitan appear to have disappeared around this time, ichthyosaurs as a group survived the end Triassic extinction and continued to thrive throughout the Jurassic and into the Cretaceous period, though they never again reached the extreme sizes seen in the late Triassic giants. This pattern of survival through mass extinctions, followed by evolutionary radiations that explored new morphological possibilities, is a recurring theme in the history of life on Earth. The marine world of the late Triassic, with its giant ichthyosaurs, diverse fish fauna, and complex ecosystems, represents a fascinating chapter in Earth's history. It was a time when reptiles ruled not only the land, but the seas as well, having evolved remarkable adaptations for marine life that allowed them to reach sizes rivaling the largest animals ever to have lived. Understanding this ancient marine environment provides crucial context for appreciating the evolutionary significance of giants like Ichthyotitan and their place in the long history of life in Earth's oceans. The story of giant ichthyosaurs like Ichthyotitan is not just about their remarkable evolution and extraordinary size, it's also about their disappearance. Why did these ocean giants, having achieved such evolutionary success, ultimately vanish from Earth's seas? The extinction of these massive marine reptiles represents one of the many fascinating mysteries in paleontology, with implications for understanding patterns of evolution and extinction more broadly. The giant Shastasaurid ichthyosaurs appear to have disappeared near the end of the Triassic period, approximately 201 million years ago. This timing coincides with the end Triassic extinction event, one of the Big Five mass extinctions in Earth's history. This global catastrophe eliminated approximately 80% of all species on the planet and had particularly severe impacts on marine ecosystems. The primary trigger for the end Triassic extinction appears to have been massive volcanic eruptions associated with the breakup of the supercontinent Pangaea and the opening of the Atlantic Ocean. These eruptions, part of what geologists call the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, CAMP, released enormous volumes of carbon dioxide and other gases into the atmosphere over a geologically brief period of hundreds of thousands of years. This volcanic activity led to a cascade of environmental changes that profoundly affected marine ecosystems. Increased atmospheric CO2 caused global warming and ocean acidification, a lowering of seawater pH, as the oceans absorbed carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. These changes would have stressed marine organisms in multiple ways, particularly those with shells or skeletons made of calcium carbonate, which become more difficult to form and maintain in more acidic conditions. Another consequence of the CAMP eruptions was the development of oceanic anoxia, zones of oxygen-depleted water that are hostile to most marine life. Anoxic conditions could have developed due to warming-induced changes in ocean circulation, reduced oxygen solubility in warmer water, and increased nutrient runoff that stimulated algal blooms and subsequent oxygen depletion as these blooms decayed. For giant ichthyosaurs like Ichthyotitan, these environmental changes would have presented significant challenges. While they were air-breathing reptiles not directly affected by reduced oxygen levels in the water, the anoxic conditions would have impacted their prey species, potentially leading to food shortages. Ocean acidification might have affected the abundance of shelled organisms that formed the base of marine food webs, indirectly affecting the prey fish that sustained large predators. The warming climate itself might have posed physiological challenges for giant ichthyosaurs. While they were likely capable of maintaining relatively stable body temperatures due to their large size, extreme warming beyond their physiological tolerances could have been stressful, particularly given their active predatory lifestyle. Warmer waters also hold less dissolved oxygen, potentially affecting the distribution and abundance of prey species. Beyond these abiotic factors, biological interactions might have contributed to the extinction of giant ichthyosaurs. Competition with other marine predators, particularly if prey resources became limited due to environmental stress, could have intensified during this period. Similarly, changes in prey communities due to extinction or migration could have disrupted the specialized feeding strategies of these giant predators. Disease is another factor that can contribute to extinction events, particularly when populations are already stressed by environmental changes. While direct evidence for disease is rarely preserved in the fossil record, modern ecological studies show that environmental stress can increase susceptibility to pathogens and parasites, potentially contributing to population declines. Reproductive challenges might also have played a role in the disappearance of giant ichthyosaurs. Large body size is often associated with lower reproductive rates, longer generation times, and increased maternal investment in fewer offspring. These life history traits, while advantageous under stable conditions, can become liabilities during times of rapid environmental change, making it difficult for populations to recover from declines or adapt to new conditions quickly enough. It's worth noting that while giant shastosaurid ichthyosaurs disappeared around the time of the end Triassic extinction, ichthyosaurs as a group survived this crisis. However, The ichthyosaurs that persisted into the Jurassic period were generally smaller and had different body proportions than their giant Triassic predecessors. This pattern suggests that whatever factors led to the extinction of giants like Ichthyotitan had selective effects rather than causing the disappearance of ichthyosaurs entirely. This differential survival raises intriguing questions about the vulnerability of extremely large animals to extinction. Throughout Earth's history, animals at the upper end of the size spectrum often seem particularly susceptible to extinction during times of environmental crisis. This pattern has been observed in multiple groups across different time periods, suggesting that extreme gigantism, while advantageous under certain conditions, may carry inherent vulnerabilities when environments change rapidly. One hypothesis for this size-selective extinction is that very large animals require more resources and have higher absolute energy needs than smaller relatives, making them more vulnerable to food shortages. Additionally, larger animals typically have slower reproductive rates and longer generation times, limiting their ability to adapt to rapid environmental changes through evolutionary processes. The extinction of giant ichthyosaurs might also reflect the specific ecological niche they occupied. As apex predators specialized for hunting large prey, they would have been particularly vulnerable to disruptions in the abundance of their preferred food sources. More generalist feeders, capable of switching between different prey types, might have been better able to weather the ecological disruptions associated with the end Triassic extinction. It's important to note that the extinction of giant ichthyosaurs like Ichthyotitan was not an isolated event, but part of a broader restructuring of marine ecosystems at the end of the Triassic. Many other marine reptile groups experienced significant turnover at this time, with some lineages disappearing entirely and others undergoing rapid diversification in the aftermath. This pattern of ecological reorganization following mass extinctions is a recurring theme in the history of life on Earth. The fate of giant ichthyosaurs offers a sobering perspective on the vulnerability of even the most successful evolutionary innovations to environmental change. These remarkable animals had evolved a suite of adaptations that allowed them to reach sizes rivaling the largest creatures ever to have lived, dominating their marine ecosystems for millions of years. Yet they disappeared relatively abruptly in geological terms, likely due to a combination of environmental stresses and ecological interactions that proved insurmountable despite their apparent evolutionary success. Understanding the extinction of giant ichthyosaurs has relevance beyond paleontological curiosity. By studying how past ecosystems responded to environmental crises and why certain species proved more vulnerable than others, we gain insights that may help inform conservation efforts for today's marine megafauna, many of which face threats from anthropogenic climate change, ocean acidification, and habitat disruption that parallel, albeit on a much more rapid timescale, the environmental changes that characterized the end Triassic world. As research continues and new fossils are discovered, our understanding of the extinction of giant ichthyosaurs will undoubtedly be refined. Each new piece of evidence helps to fill in the complex puzzle of how these remarkable ocean giants lived and why they ultimately disappeared, contributing to our broader understanding of the patterns and processes that have shaped the history of life on our planet. The discovery and study of giant ichthyosaurs like Ichthyotitan represent far more than just the addition of another prehistoric creature to the catalogue of extinct life. These enormous marine reptiles have profound significance for our understanding of evolution, the history of life on Earth, and the theoretical limits of animal size. Their legacy extends across multiple domains of scientific inquiry and public engagement with paleontology. Perhaps the most immediate significance of Ichthyotitan and its relatives is the challenge they present to the long-held belief that the blue whale represents the absolute size limit for animal life. For generations, the blue whale has been cited in textbooks, documentaries, and museum exhibits as the largest animal ever to have lived, presented as a pinnacle of evolutionary achievement that surpassed even the largest dinosaurs. The discovery that marine reptiles might have reached comparable or potentially even larger sizes forces a re-evaluation of this conventional wisdom. This revision of the size record is not merely about setting new numbers in record books. It has deeper implications for our understanding of the biological constraints on gigantism. If different lineages of marine animals, Mesozoic reptiles and Cenozoic mammals, independently evolved to similar maximum sizes, this suggests that the upper limits of animal size may be determined more by physical and ecological factors than by the specific biology of the lineage in question. The discovery of giant ichthyosaurs like Ichthyotitan challenges our understanding of the natural world's limits. If marine reptiles of the past rivaled or even surpassed the blue whale in size, what else might the fossil record still be hiding? As new discoveries continue to reshape our perspective on life's possibilities, one thing is clear: history's giants may not be as settled as we once believed.